Welcome to Civil Services Achievers Point. We are discussing today the Assam Tribune of 21st August 2020. Dear students, we are beginning with our CSET classes very soon. In these classes, we will comprehensively cover the quantitative aptitude, the English comprehension, and the logical reasoning as per the new syllabus and pattern of APSC. As you know that APSC has changed its pattern of the examination, and in the present pattern, in the preliminary stage, there are two papers. One is GS1 and one is GS2, which is also called CSAT paper. So students are advised to prepare for the CSAT paper from now itself, because the questions will be tougher from earlier times and the pattern is new. So students will need sufficient practice. For demo classes and admission, students please call the below given number so that you can avail the classes at the earliest. At Civil Services Achievers Point, we have various courses. We have offline regular classes which will begin from September. We have online classes. We have various free initiatives. Also, we are coming up with CSET class along with optional classes and ethics classes. So this Assam Tribune analysis is based on the new pattern of APSC for both preliminary and mains examination. However, it will also be useful for UPSC and other state level government examinations. These are the important newspaper articles which we are discussing today. We will also discuss some of the important editorials. So students, let us begin. The first topic is India-China hold fresh round of talks regarding the border standoff. This topic we will study under General Studies 2 paper, International Relations topic. The background is India and China on Thursday agreed to resolve outstanding issues in an expeditious manner and in accordance with the existing agreements and protocols, the Ministry of External Affairs MEA said. And it further said after the two sides that held a fresh round of diplomatic talks on the border standoff in Eastern Ladakh. That means we know that in the Eastern Ladakh sector, there was a border standoff between India and China. So this discussion was based on that border standoff. The MEA spokesperson said the two sides had a candid and in-depth exchange of views on the existing situation on the line of actual control, that is a LAC. The virtual talks were held under the framework of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination, WMCC, on border affairs. The two sides were in agreement that restoration of peace and tranquility in the border areas would be essential for the overall development of bilateral relations. So as we know that India and China has trade relations, cultural relations. So there are many dimensions of bilateral relations. However, in order to continue the in order to further develop the bilateral relations, the peace and tranquility in the border areas is very essential. Further, it is said that both sides reaffirmed to sincerely work towards complete disengagement of the troops along the LAC in the western sector in accordance in accordance with the agreements reached between the two foreign ministers as well as special representatives. That means both sides from India and China reaffirmed to work sincerely towards complete disengagement. Disengagement means withdrawing of the army from the opposite country's territory, or not violating the LAC or line of actual control. So disengagement of the troops along the LAC in the western sector in accordance with the already agreements reached between the two foreign ministers. Meanwhile, in a swift turn of events, the government is looking to bar Chinese firms from participating in government contracts in the sensitive power sector, especially for procurement of digital products that are prone to malware threats. In parallel to the border talks, Indian government has also decided to bar or ban Chinese firms from participating in government contracts in the sensitive power sector for procurement of digital products, which are frequently prone to cyber attacks. Sources in the government said that already global bidding has been barred for public procurement of up to rupees 200 crore, and more specific restrictions may be imposed on use of Chinese gear in the critical power sector. A blanket ban on use of sensitive digital equipment from China by the power sector may also be looked at, but a decision on this spending. So a wholesome a blanket ban on use of sensitive digital equipment from China by the power sector may also be looked at, but a decision on this is pending. The Power Ministry has already put restrictions on imports, such as proposals will now be vetted by it before permission is given. Also, individual digital equipment would be scrutinized for malware before being allowed inside Indian territory. So the equipments, if equipments will be the bringing of equipments will be put under restriction, and also if individual digital equipment is brought, then it will be scrutinized or checked for malware before being allowed inside Indian territory. Also, power companies have been asked to source locally in all categories where domestic capabilities exist. Now coming to the next topic, Bangladesh did not raise the CAA NRC topics during India's foreign secretary's visit to Dhaka. This topic we will study under the General Studies 2 paper, topic International Relations. India on Thursday clarified that Bangladesh did not raise the contentious issue of Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens during the two-day visit of Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla to Dhaka. So as we have covered in our last class that Indian Foreign Secretary visited Bangladesh. However, during the discussions, the two issues of the CAA and NRC did not come up. After the Foreign Secretary returned to India, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Anurag Srivastava said these issues were not raised by Bangladesh. He was replying to questions whether Dhaka had raised the issue of CAA, NRC, and Tista water sharing. It was proposed that the next meeting of the Joint Consultative Commission at the Foreign Minister level should be convened shortly to review the entire gamut of bilateral relationship, including the projects. It was also proposed that a high-level monitoring mechanism be set up to regularly review the progress of the ongoing projects. So a high-level monitoring committee or a mechanism to be set up to regularly review the progress of the ongoing projects between India and Bangladesh. Srivastava further said that there were discussions relating to the cooperation in the areas of security, including border fencing and joint efforts to prevent trans-border crimes. The issue of safe repatriation of internally displaced persons from the Rakhine state of Myanmar also came up for discussion. So there were also some crucial points discussed, like the areas of security, in the cooperation in the areas of security in order to border fence the border, and joint efforts to prevent trans-border crimes. Also the issue of the Rohingya refugees in the Chittagong and Cox's Bazar area of Bangladesh from the Rakhine state of Rakhine province of Myanmar was also discussed. Several Indo-Bangladesh projects, including the Rampal Metri power plant, the India-Bangladesh Friendship Pipeline, and rail links between Akhaura and Agartala, Chilahati and Haldibari, and Khulna Mongla are expected to be completed next year. So these some of the projects are ongoing projects, and students please note these projects, because in any question regarding Indo-Bangladesh relations, these projects may be mentioned. So these are the points which adds value to our answers, and we get extra marks for mentioning them. So students, please make a note of it, and in our further classes, if we find any update on any of the projects, we should note them too also. The MEA spokesman said India's developmental assistance in Bangladesh, as also the projects in the area of connectivity and power, were also discussed. So India's assistance in development to Bangladesh was also discussed in the area of connectivity and power. As we know, recently India has provided locomotives, and also said that during this pandemic fight, COVID-19 fight, the vaccine produced will be shared with Bangladesh. So these are the various developmental areas between India and Bangladesh, and India has assured of its commitment to the development towards Bangladesh. The discussions during the meeting also centered on the 100th birth anniversary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. As we know, it is the 100th year of the birthday of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and it's been 50 years of Bangladesh liberation. So any question on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and any question on the Bangladesh liberation is on cards for both APSC and UPSC. So students, please make a strong note of it and revise it periodically. India plans to issue a commemorative postal stamp on the Bangabandhu, that is the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, during the Mujib Borsho. Mujib Borsho, Borsho means the year, and Mujib year means Mujib Borsho, since it is the 100th birth anniversary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Srivastava said both sides also discussed the COVID-19 situation. India has provided COVID-related assistance to Bangladesh and is organizing capacity building courses for Bangladesh medical personnel. India's proposal to launch an air travel bubble between the two countries was also appreciated. So as we have already discussed, that India has provided assistance in fighting the COVID-19 to Bangladesh and is organizing capacity building courses and programs for Bangladesh medical personnel. Also, India has proposed to make an air travel bubble contract between with Bangladesh, so that air travel can be done with less restrictions and more ease. Now coming to our next topic, Rajapaksa vows to abolish 19th Amendment. Now this topic is very important because this amendment provided more power to the parliament and curtailed the power of the president. However, the new Sri Lankan president has decided to abolish this amendment. So any change or anything in news regarding parliamentary system or the presidential system, if it is in news, a similar question on the salient features of parliamentary system, salient features of presidential system, or the difference between the two systems may be asked in our examination. So students, please make a note of it. We will study this topic under General Studies 2 paper, topic International Relations. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on Thursday vowed to abolish the 19th Amendment that curtailed the powers of the President and strengthened the role of the Parliament. So as I have discussed, this amendment curtails the powers of the President and strengthens the role of the Parliament. Our first task will be to remove the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, he said while making the ceremonial address outlining his policies at the inaugural session of the new Parliament on Thursday. This stands in contrast to the comments made by his ministers on Wednesday that 19A would only be subject to amendments while retaining its healthy positions. The background is the 19A adopted in 2015 by the then reformist government was subject to much criticism by the Rajapaksa clan, as it prevented dual citizens from contesting elections. At the time, two of the Rajapaksa family members, including the current president, were dual citizens of the US and Sri Lanka. During the August 5 election, the Sri Lanka People's Party (SLPP) sought 2/3 parliamentary mandate or 150 seats in the 225 member assembly to effect constitutional changes. Therefore, most of them was the move to abolish 19A. The party, the Sri Lanka People's Party (SLPP) and allies won 150 seats and have a two-thirds majority to effect the constitutional change they desire. Rajapaksa stressed that while introducing a new constitution, it is essential to make changes to the current electoral system. While Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected as a Sri Lankan president in November last year, his elder brother Mahida Rajapaksa won the general election and assumed charge as prime minister. So the Rajapaksa family is in the key position or key post in the Sri Lankan political system. Indore gets cleanest city tag. Now this topic we will study under General Studies 1, topic Indian society, subtopic urbanization. Indore was adjudged India's cleanest city for a fourth straight year. So fourth times Indore was adjudged India's cleanest city, while Surat and Navi Mumbai grabbed the second and third positions respectively, as the center announced the results of its latest annual cleanliness survey on Thursday. Varanasi, represented by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Lok Sabha, was adjudged the best Ganga town in the country, followed by Kanpur, Munger, Prayagraj and Haridwar. Chhattisgarh was given the cleanest state award in the category of states having more than 100 urban local bodies, followed by Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. The Swachh Survekshan Indore gets Cleanest City Tag Awards 2020, the 5th annual cleanliness survey of the country, were announced by Union Housing and Urban Affairs Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. The survey brochure describes the New Delhi Municipal Council as India's cleanest national capital, that is national or state capitals or UT or Union Territory. The NDMC, the New Delhi Municipal Council, comprises large part of Rajpath and the VIP zone of Lutyens, Delhi. A total of 4,242 cities, 62 cantonment boards and 97 Ganga towns were surveyed, and 1.87 crore citizens participated in the exercise. Ambikapur in Chhattisgarh has been ranked the cleanest city in the category of 1 to 10 lakh population, followed by Mysore in Karnataka and New Delhi municipal area. The Jalandhar Cantonment Board has been ranked first, while Delhi Cantonment Board and Meerut Cantonment Board have grabbed second and third positions. According to the survey results, Jharkhand was adjudged the cleanest state in the category of having less than 100 ULBs, followed by Haryana, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Assam and Himachal Pradesh. Indore has topped the ranking in the cleanest city category, having more than 1 lakh population, and is followed by Surat, Navi Mumbai, Vijayawada and Ahmedabad in that order. Nasik has been ranked 25th, while Bihar's Patna 47, New Delhi and East Delhi 43rd and 46th positions in the cleanest city category. In the category of population of less than 1 lakh, Maharashtra's Karad bagged the first position, followed by Saswad and Lonavala. After announcing the results, it is said that Swachh Survekshan, that is cleanliness survey, will continue to help us in sustaining the gains made under Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, while providing a comprehensive roadmap to institutionalize the concept of total Swachhata among our citizens. So this line is very important. The importance of this survey should be studied for our mains perspective, and these lines may be quoted in our answers in conclusions. So students, many students question this, that how to write good answers and how to write good conclusions. So these type of statements made by various government ministers and statements of official ministries, secretaries are very important. So students, please make a note of it and use them in our answers. Now the next topic, make India a global powerhouse. IT ministers call to industry regarding the software products. This topic we will study under the General Studies 3 paper, Economic Development. Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad today exhorted the IT industry to leverage existing policies and the enabling ecosystem to position the country as a global powerhouse for software products by building innovative made in India offerings. So the union minister has asked the IT industry to use the existing policies and the ecosystem for uh, ecosystem to so that to make India a global powerhouse for software products by building innovative made in India offerings, citing the extraordinary response to grand challenges including developing of indigenous video conference solutions and apps. Prasad said that even amid economic challenges and hardships in the backdrop of COVID-19, significant investments have flowed into the IT and communication center as the world trusted India. So, the minister has expressed his happiness and he has declared that even though in the hardship and the challenging situation of COVID-19, significant investments have flowed into the IT and communication sector in India as because the world trusts India. COVID was projected as an area of economic stress, but even in these times of economic challenge and hard life, the world trusted India. So the brightest investments in IT and communications have come to India. Announcing the winners of Grand Challenge for developing video conference solution, the minister also said that India, which has already proven its prowess in software services, should also strive to become a hub of software products. So along with software services, India should also strive to become a hub for software products. The world is looking at India in a big way. I would like innovators to think about that. We have already come out with a software product policy and an encouraging ecosystem in this place. I would urge the software community to leverage India's position of innovation and startups and make it a big hub of software products. Viconsol, a product of Alappuzha, Kerala-based Techgensia Software Technologies, emerged as the winner in the grand challenge for developing video conference solution. So as we know, the video conferencing requirement increased by manifold during this COVID-19 pandemic. So indigenous development of any such technologies may be asked in our prelims-based MCQs. So students, please make a note of it. The winner of the challenge will be provided financial support of 1 crore rupees with additional 10 lakh towards operation and maintenance for next 3 years and will be adopted for use by government through contracts. So they will be given financial support and also they will be given additional amount for the towards the operation and maintenance. Along with that, they will be adopted for use by government through contract. In addition, the jury has also selected products developed by 3 applicants: SAR Webs, PeopleLink Unified Communications, InStrive Soft Labs as potential products and decided to offer a developmental contract to be supported by rupees 25 lakh each for further further maturing their products in 3 months. So these companies or firms were also offered a developmental contract to be supported by rupees 25 lakh each for further maturing their products in 3 months. So now coming to the next topic, Goyal says India will become the hospital of the world. This topic we will study under General Studies 2 paper, topic governance. Union Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal today said that along with being the pharmacy of the world, India will also become the hospital of the world. Speaking at the inauguration of CII's 12th MedTech Global Summit, Goyal was quoted in a statement as saying that we will also become the hospital of the world where the people where the world will be able to use facilities, high quality medical care and high quality treatment that India will provide to the rest of the world. The medical devices industry will be at the forefront of bringing technology to India and ensuring our rightful place in global trade for equipment and global engagement with hospitals internationally. Besides, Goel pointed out that pharmaceutical industry persevered to ensure an adequate supply of medicines for India and the world. The medical devices industry labored and helped us indigenously prepare products required to fight COVID-19. So, this is in the backdrop of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, the clarion call given by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Because in this COVID-19 pandemic, one thing which every nation has realized the importance of being Atmanirbhar or self-reliant. Further, it said our doctors, paramedics, and medical fraternity have made the nation proud by serving the common man relentlessly through their commitment to ensure the safety and well-being of the India. Furthermore, it is said that he said that industries of pharma, medical devices, and medical profession will evolve with the realization that being self-reliant is important to care for the lives of the people. So the industries of pharma, medical devices, and medical profession have to evolve to realize the importance of being self-reliant, and being self-reliant is important to care for the lives of the people. Goel further said that preventive healthcare through wellness centers will be the way forward. So preventive healthcare means before, by suppose the guidelines like sanitizing our hands, wearing the face masks. So these are preventive measures. So preventive healthcare through wellness centers will be the way forward. Now coming to the next topic, TRAI seeks public views on broadband speed. The telecom regulator has sought public views on broadband speed. This topic we will study under the General Studies 3 topic technology. Telecom regulator TRAI today invited public views to define broadband speed in various categories for both mobile as well as fixed line services, and sought suggestions on ways to increase the speed in order to meet the objective of the existing policy. So the telecom regulator today invited public views to define the broadband speed in various categories for both mobile as well as fixed line services, because this is in line with our Digital India program. Because in order to have an efficient governance, transparent and accountable government, we need proper communication network, and that is why the telecom regulator has taken this initiative. A consultation paper issued today by the regulator in this regard follows a request from the Department of Telecommunications in this matter. It aims to promote broadband connectivity in the country and figure out measures to be taken to enhance the broadband speed as envisaged in the National Digital Communications Policy, that is NDCP 2018. In essence, it appears that the DOT is seeking the authorities' recommendations on defining fixed and mobile broadband, innovative approaches for infrastructure creation, promoting broadband connectivity, and measures to be taken for enhancing broadband speed. The Telecom Regulator Authority of India, TRAI, has fixed September 21 as the last date for the comments and October 5 for the counter comments. The NDCP 2018 set a target to provide universal broadband connectivity at 50 megabit per second, that is Mbps, to every citizen, 1 Gbps connectivity to all Gram Panchayats of India by 2020, and 10 Gbps by 2022. The policy targets set up under NDCP 2018 includes facilitation of 100 Mbps broadband on demand to all key development institutions, including all educational institutions, enabling fixed line broadband access to 50% of households, deployment of 50 lakh public Wi-Fi hotspots by 2020 and 1 crore by 2022. TRAI said that during the past 5-6 years, it has issued several recommendations to the government on some broadband related issues. So these points are important. So students, please make a note of it and try to revise them. Now the next topic, Axis Bank launches hiring initiative, Giga Opportunities. Now this is a very important topic from prelims based questions, because APSC may ask in our prelims based MCQs like gig opportunities is initiative by, they will give an option like Axis, SBI, HDFC, Union Bank. So we have to remember and answer it correctly. Now this topic we will study under General Studies 3 paper, Economic Development. Axis Bank has plans to employ nearly 1,000 people under its hiring initiative Gig Opportunities model, a model devised to attract skilled talent that can work with the bank remotely from anywhere in the country, according to a company official. So as per this initiative called Gig Opportunities, it is a model which is devised to attract skilled talent that can work from any place with the bank, and it can work remotely and it can work from any place. This hiring model comprises two working patterns. First is full-time permanent job, and the second is based on the duration of a project. Our idea is that gig would be large or regular jobs. We wanted to make it as effective as a normal job would have been for anyone, both in terms of being content with the job or what people learn from their job over the next 1 year. We will add 800 to 1,000 people working through this model, and that is the minimum I am saying. Now this is a statement from the executive director of Axis Bank. Earlier the mindset was that for working you have to come to the office, but now this work from home concept has changed many things, stating that people were hesitant in the first place about working from home. Further, Dahiya said that but now they have got used to it, and this is proving to be very productive and also very efficient. He said the bank will look for good talent, including young people, experienced mid-level professionals and women across the country. Giga opportunities typically will have full-time permanent jobs and also project-specific jobs with a fixed term that can finish in 8 months or a year. So this is a very good initiative. Students, please make a note of it, so that if any question comes in our prelims MCQ based question, we can answer them correctly. Now coming to the next topic, RBI suggests action plan to promote financial education. Now this topic is very important and we will discuss this under the General Studies 3 topic, General Studies 3 paper topic, Economic Development. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, today came out with a 5 core actions approach. Now this is very important. What is the 5 core actions approach? The 5 core actions approach for promoting financial education, which among other things include development of relevant content for school children and adults, community participation and collaboration among various stakeholders. The National Strategy for Financial Education 2020 to 2025, NSFE, it is the National Strategy for Financial Education 2020 to 2025, released by the RBI, has suggested a multi-stakeholder led approach for creating a financially aware and empowered India. The 5 C's outlined by the strategy paper are content, capacity, community, communication and collaboration. So this is a very important point. Students may quote this point directly in your answers and it will give an additional boost to your marks. The RBI has released a strategy, that is the National Strategy for Financial Education 2020 to 2025, that is the NSFE. It suggests a multi-stakeholder led approach for creating a financially aware and empowered India. The 5 C's which is outlined in the paper, strategy paper, are content, capacity, community, communication, and collaboration. Strengthening financial inclusion in the country. What is financial inclusion? Financial inclusion is bringing the various informal sectors and various vulnerable sectors under the purview of the financial system is called financial inclusion. One of the program or schemes in the financial inclusion sector is the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana. So these are some of the steps for financial inclusion. So further it says strengthening financial inclusion in the country has been one of the most important developmental agendas of both the government and the 4 financial sector regulators. So what are the 4 financial sector regulators? RBI, SEBI, IRDAI and PFRDA. So this is important. Financial literacy supports the pursuit of financial inclusion by empowering the customers by empowering the customers to make informed choices leading to their financial well-being. So financial literacy supports the aim of financial inclusion by empowering the customers to make informed choices. And when customers will make informed choices based on financial literacy, then it will lead to financial well-being. That is the management of money. See, in our recent times and in also our last budget, Government of India has already stressed on wealth creation. See, for the last 70 odd years, the aim of the various government has been poverty alleviation. However, there has been a paradigm shift under this new government that along with poverty alleviation or poverty eradication, we are also focusing on wealth creation. So this statement directly you can quote in your answers, and students, this will give an immense it will be immense helpful in your answers and will give you very good marks. That financial literacy supports the pursuit of financial inclusion by empowering the customers to make informed choices leading to their financial well-being. To achieve the vision of creating a financially aware and empowered India, the NSFE has laid down strategic objectives like inculcate financial literacy concepts among the various sections of the population through financial education to make it an important life skill and encourage active savings behavior. Among the other strategic objectives are encouraging participation in financial markets to meet financial goals and objectives, developing credit discipline and encourage availing credit from formal financial institutions as per requirement, and improving uses of digital financial services in a safe and secure manner. So the various objectives of the strategy paper released by RBI, the various objectives are mentioned here. Students, you can also use these points in your answers. So in our upcoming answer writing classes, we will discuss these points. Managing risk at various life stages through relevant and suitable insurance cover and plan for old age and retirement through coverage of suitable pension products are the other key objectives laid in the document. The document stresses development of financial literacy content for school children, including curriculum and co-scholastic teachers, young adults, women, new entrants at workplace, entrepreneurs, MSMEs, senior citizens, persons with disabilities, illiterate people, etc. Update content of financial education in school curriculum for students of class 6 to 10. So financial education should also be encouraged or should also be given to school children. It also makes a case for integrating financial education in courses like B.Ed, M.Ed, besides other teachers training courses to create a cadre of financially educated teaching professionals. It also calls for development of a financial literacy mobile app and leveraging social media. NSFE further said the technical group on financial inclusion and financial literacy TGFIFL would be responsible for periodic monitoring and implementation of national strategy for financial education. There would also be periodic monitoring of the activities undertaken by various stakeholders for dissemination of basic sector-specific and process literacy. Since the launch of the first NSFE in 2013, various stakeholders have undertaken several measures to improve the financial literacy of the cross-section of the population in the country. Financial literacy is defined. Now, this is a very important definition. Students, you can directly write this statement. Financial literacy is defined as a combination of financial awareness, knowledge, skills, attitude, and behavior necessary to make sound financial decisions and ultimately achieve individual financial well-being. So financial literacy will lead to financial well-being. So students, many important points have been made in here because this is an RBI initiative and it will be asked by APSC and also by UPSC. So students, please make a note of it and revise them regularly so that if any question comes in the examination hall, it can be answered easily. We will discuss now the important editorials. The first editorial which we are discussing today is the future of Indo-Nepal relations. Now this topic we will study under the General Studies 2 paper, topic international relations, and further subtopic, and a question will be asked on Indo-Nepal relations. A short questions on Indo-Nepal, Indo-China, Indo-Sri Lanka. These questions are on expected lines. Students, please make a note of all the recent happenings which we will be covering in our current affairs classes. So students, be ready for a question on these lines. Now coming to the editorial, the rapid and calculated intrusions by the Beijing diplomatic corps into the power corridors of Kathmandu are really alarming. That means the rapid and calculated intrusions by Beijing diplomatic corps into the power corridors, that is into the political system of Kathmandu, that is Nepal, are alarming. The inclusion of 3 places, namely Kalapani, Limpiadhura, and Lipule, traditionally thought to be on the Indian side, is sufficient to accelerate the tension between India and Nepal. It is learned that Nepal has already placed these modified maps in their permanent and officially started to use them. The media reports say that the authorities concerned have placed an order to the tune of 25,000 to print them. Further, the country has taken special initiatives to send these maps to powerful international organizations like Google for global distribution and recognition. Kathmandu has taken steps to display these maps in their important offices. Such alert and active participation by the political wings in redrawing the border areas with respect to India is sufficient to gloss over the changes in the current diplomatic thinking. One of the seasoned diplomats, Jagat S. Mehta, once remarked that one of the big challenges in diplomacy is to strike a balance between big and small neighborhoods. By all accounts, Nepal is a small neighbor. This certainly creates a psychological pressure in the diplomatic wing of Kathmandu. Kathmandu has every reason to view the Indian moves as something intrusive in nature and actions of a big brother. This power play between unequal neighbors brings certain psychological ingredients into the concerned domain. India, with its vast experience of diplomatic psychology and strategic maneuvers, must be the first party to diffuse such a situation. So, India, with such a vast experience of diplomatic psychology and strategic maneuvers, must be the first party to diffuse any psychological tension between its small neighbors. And this is in line with our Gujral doctrine. As per Gujral doctrine, India should not treat the smaller countries in its neighborhood as small brothers and itself as a big brother. So India has to remove its big brother attitude, and this is as per the Gujral doctrine. But further it says, diplomatic exercises are continuous efforts with firm footings in the historical discourses. But historical facts may easily be sidelined with reference to our current realities. Elements of beliefs may be wiped out with one single stroke as invalid imaginations of speculative minds. Reality stands as something immediate and full of presentable evidence. So, historical facts may be easily sidelined means the history between Indo-Nepal friendship may currently be sidelined with the recent happenings. Elements of belief may be wiped out with a single stroke as invalid imaginations of speculative minds. That is, if we believe that Nepal is a all-weather friend of India, that belief may be wiped out as invalid imaginations of speculative minds by the current actions, because reality has a presentable evidence. Diplomats understand these discourses better than anybody else. They have to rely on and tread through many disturbing and often conflicting elements to form a substantial strategy for implementation. Somehow they have to be cold and calculating in order to bring innovative measures to handle these subtle crises over a period of time. So the diplomats have to be cold and they have to take calculated steps in order to bring innovative measures to handle these situations or crises over a period of time. Nepal is a country with a population of 20. So Nepal is a country with a population of around 2 crore 80 lakh 95,000 people. Its GDP in 2018 was $30 billion. There was an estimate that the economy of the country was growing at a rapid rate of more than 6% and would attain a rate of more than 7% by 2019. However, the COVID-19 epidemic has altered the whole scenario. The global economy may experience negative growth. Our country may too find her down the trajectory of negative growth. So far, Nepal has not published any growth projection officially. It is known that agriculture and allied activities play a key role in the Nepalese economy. One estimate shows that the total workforce of the country is 16.8 million. Agriculture provides 27.59 percentage contribution to the country's economy and provides employment opportunities to 79% of the workforce. Manufacturing and craft-based activities provide the livelihood opportunities for 6% of the workforce. Similarly, the service sector gives employment opportunities to 18% of the workforce. A glance over these statistics may reveal several elements in operation. Firstly, in the post-COVID world, agriculture will play a significant role in rebuilding the Nepalese economy. Disruptions in the service sector and the manufacturing sector will release a considerable workforce unemployed and directionless. Moreover, the agricultural activities in this Himalayan country are operational mostly along the subsistence level. That is, the agricultural activities in Nepal are subsistence level. That means they are not for commercial benefits, they are only for consuming the producer. The producer of the crops consumes themselves. So those farming are called subsistence farming. So India, with her vast experience in agricultural and allied activities, can directly contribute to relieve the pressure and pain in this region. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research, that is the ICAR, may play a crucial role in developing this sector for the country. This may be one of the key areas where with the introduction of the high yielding varieties of seeds, HYV seeds, fertilizers, other relevant equipment may bring certain key tools in the hands of diplomatic corps to intrude into the livelihood and other practices of the common man. So the various diplomats may use these agriculture related tools to start a fresh breath of air between India and Nepal. It is the role of the common man and ideas generated among them which yield a significant step towards creating goodwill among our neighbors. The Global Slavery Index has shown that in the Western Hills and the Terai region of Nepal, an estimated figure of 234,000 people are within the debt bondage. It is a pathetic situation where the trap of debt bondage ruins the future of many children. India can boldly devise pragmatic tools to rescue these children, protect their future, and provide them adequate education facilities and necessary skills for survival in the post-COVID post-COVID world. If we can influence the lives of the younger generation in Nepal, it will not only be a great diplomatic success, but will surely stand as an outstanding contribution to humanity. So this is another area where India may help Nepal to get out of the debt bondage. Nepal has enjoyed many privileges from the days of our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. The Indo-Nepal Treaty of 1950 has laid the foundation of the mutual trust, cooperation and progress between these two neighbors. While some of the Nepali elites find this treaty as unequal, as hinted by Syam Saran, another seasoned diplomat, however, no democratically elected government in Nepal so far has tried to bring institutional modifications or reconsideration of this treaty. It may be noted that with 1 year notice in advance, this treaty may be cancelled. The Kathmandu visit by PM Modi in 2014, after a gap of 17 years from the visit of the former PM I.K. Gujral, naturally reflects the goodwill of India. It also shows the willingness on the part of the Delhi establishment to redraw the bilateral maps of cooperation and strategic alliance. The recent donation of 10 ventilators to the Nepalese army on August 9 by the Indian Army at the hands of the Nepalese Chief of Army Staff Purna Chandra Thapa is worth noting. It may be mentioned that the Army Chief Thapa was honored with the honorary rank by the President Ramnath Kovind in 2019. All these indicate that the Chinese intrusion into Kathmandu by the charming ambassador Hoan Kei can be handled with subtler diplomatic, cultural, and economic means. Beijing can take forward more actions like the introduction of Gorkha-style regiments into the PLA and a gradual merging of the territorial Nepal with the Chinese mainland. With our 58-year-old seasoned diplomat Binoy Mohan Patra in Kathmandu as the ambassador, India can surely look forward to having Nepal more aligned to New Delhi than Beijing. So in this editorial, many important points have been made regarding Indo-Nepal relations. So students, please make a note of it so that if any question comes in examination, we can answer them correctly. Now the next topic is very important. It is regarding our urbanization, as also it is linked with environment. The topic need for open space. We will study this topic under the General Studies 1 paper, Indian Society, and General Studies 3 paper, topic environment. An expanding metropolis needs more space, but the haphazard growing of the capital city has led to a severe shrinkage of open space. This, together with the depletion of forests and water bodies caused by an intensive development process, is denying the citizens a vital requirement essential by an essential for uh, essential for their well-being. So what it is saying is that whenever a city expands, it needs more space. However, the haphazard growth of the city leads to the shrinkage of open space. Open space decreases. This also it is contributed by the depletion of forests, deforestations, and the depletion of water bodies caused by the developmental processes. And all this is denying the citizens and the young children a vital requirement essential for their well-being. Now the committee constituted to review the Guwahati Master Plan is exploring the possibility of creation of more open spaces across different locations of the city and developing and protecting the existing ones. So the committee which is reviewing the Guwahati Master Plan is looking for creating and developing and protecting the existing open spaces. This is undoubtedly a good and much needed move, but one fails to understand why the authorities have all along failed to accord due protection to the existing open spaces besides creating new ones. It is said that we need open space and forests and water bodies for ensuring a sound environment for the city besides meeting its aesthetical needs. So unless this issue is taken seriously by the authorities, we will only end up losing these free and natural spaces completely. So if not proper attention is given, then these open spaces may be lost. The panel is also said to be exploring a comprehensive drainage system for the city. This is another vital requirement as the phenomenon of rainwater from Meghalaya inundating a vast part of the city has worsened in recent years. So, along with for more open spaces and protecting the existing ones, we also need a proper drainage system so that the rainwater coming from Meghalaya can be properly given a direction through the drainage system. Diverting the storm water to the deeper bill can be a viable option. So the water coming from the nearby hills can be diverted to the wetlands. So diverting the storm water to the deeper bill is a good option. A casualty of the city's unscientific and haphazard expansion has been its open space, with high rises spurting at every conceivable space, often in violation of norms. The citizens have been left groping for breathing space. Among the worst hit have been the children and the elderly, as few localities have been left with recreational grounds following the real estate boom. This development has disturbing implications because our children are being denied the opportunity to stretch their limbs through sporting and recreational activities so essential for their all-round growth. So apart from regular academic studies, the children also need sports and recreational activities for their all-round growth. The few existing parks and recreational grounds are simply not enough to meet the needs of cities' expanding population. Every locality should ideally have a playground for children. We should also explore the prospects of creating some open space through community efforts. Significantly, a large part of the city's open space that has borne the brunt of our development falls on ecologically sensitive areas. The vandalism perpetrated on nature has also invited the inevitable backlash in the form of artificial floods in years. So the developmental impact, the impact of development activities on the environment has created the problems like artificial flood, landslide, dust pollution, etc. So the authorities must learn from these, and something must be done so as to protect the environment and keep the open spaces. Guwahati's once pristine landscape comprising a number of water bodies, hills and forests offered tremendous prospect for developing it as a model city with thrust on tourism promotion, but but now a lot of challenges are there, and it has to be overcome through various the schemes and policies. Other expanding towns of the state should also take an example of Guwahati's example, and should implement the measures at the earliest possible so as to avoid the challenging situations which happened in Guwahati. So with this, we have discussed this editorial, the last editorial. I hope this video was helpful. So students, thank you for watching this video. I hope it will be helpful in your examination. Thank you.